Here in America, work is in trouble. We've offshored our manufacturing, sent away good jobs, and lost so much ability to make things. American Giant is a company that's pushing back against this tide. They make high-quality clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more right here in the USA. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, promo code STAPLE20.
It's Amy here, and Kim often gets asked how Radical Candor should work with neurodivergent employees. After hearing Dr. Temple Grandin relay an experience where Temple's boss gave her feedback in just the right way, we thought it would be really helpful for you, our listeners, to hear directly from Temple. We are so excited to share this conversation between Temple Grandin and Kim Scott about the feedback Temple received, why it was helpful, and so much more wisdom. Dr. Temple Grandin is a world-renowned inspirational autism activist, author of 28 books, and an animal welfare and behavior expert. She's a prominent proponent of the humane treatment of livestock for slaughter and the author of more than 60 scientific papers on animal behavior. A designer of livestock handling facilities and a professor of animal science at Colorado State University. Facilities that Temple Grandin has designed are located in the United States, Canada, Europe, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, and other countries. In 2010, Time 100, an annual list of the 100 most influential people in the world, named Temple in the Heroes category. Dr. Grandin was also the subject of the Emmy and Golden Globe winning biographical film Temple Grandin, starring Claire Danes. Dr. Grandin has been an outspoken proponent of autism rights and neurodiversity movements. And in 2017, she was inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame, and in 2018 made a fellow by the American Association for the Advancement of Science. We are honored to host Temple Grandin in this insightful, powerful, informative, and authentically, radically candid conversation. We hope you enjoy it.
Hello, everybody. I'm Kim Scott. Welcome to the Radical Candor podcast. And Temple, welcome to you. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you because I get questioned very often that I do not feel that I am qualified to answer, but I think you are very well qualified to answer the question. So here's the question. What's the best way to give radically candid feedback to my employees who are neurodivergent? When I met you, told me a really good story about a time when someone gave you some feedback in exactly the right way. So why don't you share that story with folks?
First of all, vague feedback does not work. Like saying you're not a
Right.
team player, you're rude to colleagues. That doesn't work. This was on my very first project. And I criticized some welding, and I said it looked like pigeon doo-doo.
And it probably did. That was probably
engineer
accurate.
at the Swift plant,
Mhm.
Harley.
Mhm.
He was a very good job coach.
Mhm.
And he quietly pulled me into his office,
Mhm.
very quietly in private. I remember that little office down in the boiler room. And he says, we have to nip these little cancers before they metastasize.
Wow.
Whitey the welder is up in the cafeteria right now on break.
Uh-huh.
You are going to apologize to him for that kind of rude talk. And he
Uh-huh.
also explained to me how Whitey, the welder, was his employee. And if I didn't like the welding, I should have come to him to complain about it. He also said, well, Whitey's a maintenance welder and his welds are rough, but they really do hold.
Mhm.
And I went right up to the cafeteria to Whitey
Mhm.
and I apologized for the rude talk.
Mhm.
You see, he told me exactly what I should do in private.
Yes.
He didn't say a vague, rude to colleagues.
Yeah.
And a lot of people on the autism spectrum want this kind of feedback. They find, they need to be told what to do. It's sort of like teaching a person how to behave in a foreign country.
Yeah.
There might be certain
Yes.
gestures that in this country are fine, then in another country would be bad.
That is such a good analogy because we're not often aware, like you probably were not aware that what you had said to Whitey the welder was rude.
Well, it was rude. I
Yeah.
should have known better than that. Calling it pigeon doo-doo.
Right.
But
But
you
that
see,
also could be
telling me
considered.
exactly what I had to do. Now, a
Mhm.
lot of autistic people have some hygiene issues, and there's a scene in the HBO movie where they
Mhm.
slammed down the deodorant and said, "You stink." That happened,
Oh,
and I
really?
wanted that job, so I cleaned it up. And while
Right.
we're on
So
the
you use
HBO
the
movie,
deodorant.
it shows exactly how I think visually. The other
Mhm.
thing is, I don't think in broad generalities.
Mhm.
Something like polite behavior or considerate behavior, I like see little phone videos on like you'd have on your phone
Yeah.
of memories. I now think of something that was not considerate when I was a very young child. Mother was sleeping and I asked her to open this little glue thing for me
Uh-huh.
so I could put my model together. That was
Right.
not being very considerate. But
Because
you
she was
see,
asleep.
that is a specific example
Mhm.
of something that was not considerate.
Right.
Another thing that would be being considerate is I had to get something out of her sewing box. She was asleep, and I did it very quietly.
So that was being
That
considerate.
was being considerate because I made
Yes.
sure I did not wake her up.
Yes.
But that's the kind of specific examples I need.
So when Harley told you that that was rude, you understood why already.
I understood why.
Yes. Yeah.
And right after he explained to me that also the chain of command, because Whitey was his employee,
Yes.
I went right up to the cafeteria, sat down next to Whitey. I'm now remembering it just
Mhm.
really, really super well. And I apologized for the rude talk.
Yes. And how did Whitey respond to
He was
you?
fine. We and Whitey were kind of best buds after that.
So this worked out really well. It did prevent a small thing from becoming a big conflict.
Well, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So
But
if
on
I
the
could.
other hand, I didn't
Mhm.
praise the welding as being wonderful.
Yes, you
I
didn't bet.
I
You because it
apologized
wasn't.
for the rude talk, and I said nothing about the quality of the welding.
Yes, that's important because if you had lied about what you thought about the welding, then your apology would have come off as
No. I
insincere.
just apologized for the rude talk.
Yes, yeah. That is so. So let me see if I can abstract up from this specific example for people who do think in abstractions. What worked? I think one thing that worked is that he was very specific about. He didn't say, you need to be more collegial.
No, he
He
didn't
said,
say that.
yeah, he
He
said
didn't
you were
say that.
rude to Whitey when you
He
said
basically after he said, "Whitey's in the cafeteria right now on break."
yes.
And he said in just about that tone of voice, "And you're gonna go up there right now and apologize for the rude talk."
Right. So the second thing that was very helpful about this feedback was that he told you what to do, when
Right.
to do it, and
Yes.
where to do it.
Yes.
Like very specific next step.
Oh, it was very, very specific because the Whitey's break was 30 minutes.
Yes.
So I would have had to have gotten up there within 15 minutes.
Yes. Yeah. So that's another thing that people should know is be specific about what went wrong and be as specific as possible about the what, when, and where of how to make it right.
No, I was to go up there as soon as I walked out of his office. I was to go straight to the cafeteria and make
Yeah.
the apology.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have a question for you. What if you didn't agree that what you had said was rude or you didn't understand why it was rude?
Well,
What
saying
would have been
somebody's work looks like pigeon doo-doo is pretty
yes.
obvious
Yes.
that
Yes.
that's not a nice comment.
Yes.
I understood that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I worked with an employee, so I would love to get your advice on this. Can I give you a scenario and you can give me
Give me a
advice?
scenario.
Okay, so there was an employee who worked for me. He was on the spectrum. He was an engineer. So he's very good at being very specific about what he thought about things. And there was a team of people, about 6 people, and we had to get together to meet. And this guy who was working for me, the one time that was convenient for everyone else was the time when he usually took his run every day. And he was very focused on his workout regimen. And he didn't like to change the time of his run. And when it emerged that this worked for 5 of the 6 people and maybe he could do his run an hour earlier or an hour later, what he said was, this makes me mad because I care more about my run than this meeting.
I would not have said that.
No, you would not have. But when I explained to him the problem with what he said and why it made everybody so mad, he really didn't understand why it was a problem. And from his perspective, he said, "I'm just telling the truth. Like my run is more important to me than this meeting." And why is everybody so upset? Why are people having these emotions? And why do I have to care about people's emotions moreover?
Well, one of the things I've figured out after being on a lot of jobs, I've worked for a lot of different companies because I was a freelance designer. So
Mhm.
I've done equipment installs and stuff like that for every major meat company.
Yes.
I've worked with the
Yeah.
best bosses. I've worked with the worst bosses. I've worked with all kinds of different people. And so I kind of developed a thing called project loyalty.
Mhm.
You've got to get the project done.
Yes.
And it maybe the other people couldn't meet at any other time.
Mhm.
The other thing is I also would be thinking about how actually important for the project, whatever the engineering was this meeting. Some meetings are definitely more important than others.
Yes. Yeah, and this was
I
a really
think
important
maybe I need to know
meeting.
more about what he was doing on the engineering team.
He was the lead engineer
The
building
lead
them.
engineer, he has to be there.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
he had to be
that's the
there.
kind of thing I need to know.
Yes. Yes.
Where I was, like we'd have project meetings about this big plant that was getting built.
Mhm.
And my part of it was all the cattle handling part, all of that part.
Mhm.
Well, if they're gonna have a meeting on the new chiller,
Mhm.
maybe I don't have to go to that. That's not my
Yes.
part of the plant.
Yes.
But, um, he was the project manager.
Yeah, so he had to be there.
Well, he needs to be there. And the thing is, you're the project manager for something. That's pretty important. What was the project actually?
It was an app that managers could use to get advice on how to be more radically candid. So that was the project.
Well, he's running's more important than that.
Well,
The thing is, I
yeah.
mean, one thing I had to learn, and I've worked for
Mhm.
so many different companies,
Mhm.
is every job, and it took me a while to learn this, no matter how good a job it is, will have some things you don't like.
Yes.
The difference between good places and bad places is good places have less of these problems.
Yes.
But these other managers may have commitments like, picking kids up from school or something else, things that they've got to do. And I think someone needs to counsel him that changing your run by 1 hour shouldn't be that big a deal. I'm not
Yeah.
saying don't do your runs.
Yes.
That's kind of getting down to what's more important, your job or, before I could fully answer it, I kind of got to know what he was doing. Maybe there was something where, let's say he was working on just some part of the app. It would maybe wouldn't have been so important for him to be there.
Yeah, he was the engineer on this. So
He's
there's
the
no
engineer,
point.
is the project manager.
Yes, he was
And
he was going to build it. So if he wasn't there, there was no
well,
point in having the meeting.
no, he's out of order here, as far as I'm
Yes.
concerned.
Yes. No,
Because
I agree with you that he was out of order, but my question, I guess, is how could I explain to him why it was worth it to him to pay attention to the emotions of the people in the room? And so I'll tell you what
well,
I
because
said to him.
you want your team to get stuff done.
Yes. Yes.
And changing the time of the meeting may have been more difficult for those other team members than changing a run, like
Yes.
picking your kid up from childcare.
Yes.
That's a bit more rigid
Yeah.
than the time of your run. You see, I
Yes.
am like giving examples of other things that the other people might have to do.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's really helpful. That's
Yeah,
really helpful.
that see, so this is why in a lot of situations I got to have very specific information.
That is really helpful for me and for people, I think, listening to know that you can't talk in abstractions. You've got to get very
Well,
specific.
that's when in one of my books on animals in translation, I talk about government policies and things being too abstractified,
Yes.
and they don't have any way of how are you going to actually do the stuff.
Yes.
You
Exactly.
see, I think about things very, very specific examples, and then I can take a whole lot of specific examples and I can put them into categories.
And one of the things that I love about your book is your ability to explain how you think.
Oh, you're talking about my visual thinking book?
Yes, yes,
The visual thinking book right here.
such a great book, such a
And
great book.
my memories, I think the best way to just explain them using modern technology is they're like little phone videos that move just a little bit, and I can access them, and I'll get okay. Let's look. There, it's also associative because we talked about pigeon doo doo. That I can also get in the pigeon file.
Right.
And I was at the Newark airport last week, and I've got a new way to help with back pain. I make myself look up, and I've got to become a connoisseur of the airport ceilings and tops of
Okay.
buildings as I walk, because that forces me to stand up and it helps my back. And I saw the
that's a
coolest
tip.
pigeon, the Newark airport, and it flew full speed down an entire concourse.
Wow.
Yeah. So now I'm in the pigeon file.
Yes. Okay. And that's good.
Yeah, I can get out of the welding file, get in the pigeon file. We also have some pigeons over the door at the Denver airport, and what they do over the door is not so nice.
They leave some poop there.
Yes, they do, and they really try to clean it up, and it's just a mess.
It's
See,
a
now I'm in
mess.
the pigeon file.
Yes.
But as I see these things, I see the pigeon flying,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like a video that moves a little bit. I see the pigeons roosting with their butts hanging out in the early morning.
Mm-hmm.
I see them. They come up like pulling a picture up on a phone.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that one of the things that's so interesting about your book is that you notice things that I never in a million years would notice. So, for example, in your talk, you shared a picture from an airport where there was sort of a UFO theme. So why don't you
That
describe?
was the sign at the Denver airport. It's a really
Yeah.
funny sign. It's been there for years.
Yes.
And it says, "Don't forget me." You come
Uh-huh.
out of security and it has like headphones, passport, your belt.
Yeah.
I mean, things like that you would want on, your phone kind of stuff.
Your boarding pass, your
Your boarding
keychain.
pass. But the boarding pass, if you look at it, is a flight to Area 51 at
Yes.
gate A51.
Yes.
And the flight duration is like, the beaming duration is like 2 seconds.
Yes. Yes.
It has a picture, it has a little flying saucer on it, beaming you up.
Yes. And then describe the keychain.
And the keychain has a fob that has a UFO on it.
Mm-hmm. So you noticed all these details.
Yeah, I tend to notice that kind of stuff. I also notice on electronic signs, if there's anything wrong with an electronic sign, 1 pixel off in an electronic sign, I'll see it.
You'll notice it.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, I'll notice it.
Yeah. Another thing that you describe in your book, like if you tell me to draw a steeple, I will draw a triangle, 2 lines. That's it.
Just 2 lines. Well, I thought when I was younger, when I was doing my cattle work, I thought everybody thought in pictures the way I think.
Yes.
And this helped me in my work with cattle because I got down in the chutes to see what they were seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they'd be afraid of a shadow. They'd be afraid of a reflection, some little piece of string hanging down, some little thing like that. And if you took these things out of the chute, they'd go up the chute. Always get afraid of getting slaughtered. No, they're more afraid of a weird shadow.
Yes. Yeah, they had no idea they were going to get
But that's
slaughtered.
looking at what they are seeing.
Yes.
Then I discovered a speech therapist that when I asked her about a church steeple, all she got was just sort of a skinny triangle, where a visual thinker like me starts naming off the steeples where they're at.
Yes. Yeah.
They
And
come
so
up
you
like
see all the details on various specific steeples
they come up like PowerPoint slides.
in your mind.
But they also are specific places.
Yes.
It's not generalized. Now, why would I pick church steeple for this question? Because most people can see their own car, their own pet, or their own house.
Mm-hmm.
But if I ask you something like church steeple, and I was doing this before cell phone towers existed, now that's another thing I could ask you about. I'm seeing this really pretty good fake tree that we have here. I'm also seeing the cell phone transmitter on our equine center that's worthless once you're inside the building. You see, I'm seeing specific ones, especially ones that are kind of unique.
Yes. Yes. And that has so much value. Your ability to see something in all its details and something that's very concrete, whereas I just immediately abstract all the
Well, I
details
want to
away.
just talk a little bit about the kinds of thinking. In my visual thinking book, I talk about 3 kinds of thought. You have object visualizers like me,
Mm-hmm.
whose memories are like little phone pictures. We're
Mhm.
good at photography,
Mm-hmm.
animals,
Mm-hmm.
mechanical devices.
Mhm.
Anything to do with fixing and building mechanical devices and art. And another
Mhm.
kind of mind is the visual spatial math pattern thinker. They think patterns, not pictures. They're your chemists, computer programmers,
Yes,
physicists, and then your word thinkers.
that's
And there's
me.
actual research, and I have this in my visual thinking book that shows that the object visualizer and the visual spatial mathematical mind are actually 2 different kinds of thought.
Mm-hmm.
And there's research to back that up. In fact, there's some fabulous new research that was just published in Nature that shows that words are not required for thought.
That's amazing. And
I
I believe that. Yeah.
But I think there's some verbal thinkers can't imagine thought without words. But you get things too abstract, you have no idea how you're actually going to do it.
Yes. And you also often, when things get too abstract, people are often talking about 2 different things and completely miscommunicating, which
Well,
is
and then I
why
get, they talk about the existentialist meaning of life or something like that. Now
Yeah.
I'm seeing there used to be this old magazine we read as kids called Life magazine.
Uh-huh.
When I said that, I saw that, which I know is inappropriate. And I'm also seeing my Hubble Deep Space Field poster I've got behind me.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yes. So I think it's so important. One of the things that I love about your book is you talk about the value of getting different kinds of thinkers on the same team together.
We need them.
Yes, yeah, it's
Traveling
essential.
around now, nobody's fixing elevators and escalators.
Yes.
It's just
And
terrible.
and our school system is failing us because we're not rewarding. Well, the only kind of intelligence we're rewarding is sort of the math intelligence.
Well, we're not even doing a good job with our math kids. I'm hearing
Yes.
horror story after horror story of like a 4th grader in math, bored doing baby math, turns into a
Yes.
behavior problem when he probably ought to be studying high school math in 4th grade. They're
Yeah.
not being developed. And I talk about how we need the visual thinkers to do all the mechanical things. I just read
Yes.
today's Wall Street Journal that 47% of all the shipbuildings in China,
Wow.
and they can't get anybody here to work on building ships.
Yes. And why is that? What's the
I
reason
think
for
it
that?
goes
What's
back
your
to taking shop classes out of the schools. I think it's
Yes.
one of the worst things that we ever did. We've got kids growing up today that have never used a tool.
Mhm.
I had a 16-year-old in my livestock handling class, and they have to do a scale drawing in my class,
Mhm.
who had never used a ruler or tape measure in her whole life.
Wow.
She had never physically measured something.
Wow.
So we get all these people totally separated from what I call the world of real things.
Yes.
And I was in a hotel just the other day. I'm hoping I was not going to get stuck in this elevator. The door was truly geriatric. It was
Uh-huh.
moving super slowly. I said, I hope it
Oh,
doesn't get
no.
stuck. I don't want to get stuck in this elevator.
Yes.
That was just the other day.
Yeah, nobody can fix the elevator. Nobody we've lost contact with the real world.
Well, some of the people could fix elevators really good, be some of these autistic kids. But
Yes.
you've got to get them exposed to stuff, like elevator mechanisms. I love to look at the elevator mechanisms that you can see in some of these glass elevators at hotels.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's something you can show that to an autistic kid because it's visible through the glass.
Yes.
You've got to show kids interesting stuff to get them interested in interesting stuff.
And that's another thing I love about your talks and also your book is you talk about the interesting things that you were shown as a child. So what were some of the most inspiring, interesting things that you were shown as a child?
Well, I remember being fascinated by these tide gates they had that when they would close under a bridge and it would keep this one little harbor full of water when the rest of everything else was mud flats. My grandfather
Wow.
took me out there and explained how they worked and go there when the tides changed. I could watch them close off the bridge. That kind of stuff I found really interesting. In the HBO movie about me, I
Mhm.
was all interested in optical illusion rooms.
Mhm.
And they actually showed the original Bell Labs movie that I
Mhm.
saw that got me interested in optical illusion rooms, how to end up in the cattle industry. I
Mhm.
was exposed to it as a teenager.
Mhm.
Exposure, you've got to expose kids to lots and lots of different stuff. I like to get math kids really turned on to good stuff. Like I was just at this school that was right next to a great big data center. Well, you ought to see the electrical stuff coming into that place, the amount of power it eats.
Yes.
Well, they won't let you go in there, but you can drive around it. And say this whole big warehouse is full of thousands of computers in here. They take a
Yes.
city's worth of electricity.
Yes.
Wouldn't
Yeah.
you like to grow up and design computers that will take half the electricity? So when you stream movies and stuff, it's half the electricity.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's such good advice for parents of kids, no matter who your kids are, because often your kids are fascinated by something that you yourself don't find fascinating. And so being willing to follow your children's fascinations can help them
They also
grow.
have to get exposed to things. My grandfather was
Mhm.
an engineer. He was the co-inventor of the autopilot for airplanes. And when we'd go over to Granny and Grandfather's house for like Sunday dinners, he and I would go retreat to the study. He'd smoke his pipe, and I'd ask him why the sky was blue, and he'd
Yeah.
explain it. And I think he actually liked doing it. Why is
Yes.
grass green? Why do tides go in and out?
Yes. Yes.
I'd ask him those kinds of questions.
Yeah. So being open to these kinds of
Well, and he
questions for their
explained it,
kids.
and too many kids. I mean, all the research is showing we need to be getting them off the screens and getting them out doing more real things.
Yeah.
That's why I've got little books like The Outdoor Scientist,
Mhm.
which is just get kids looking at stars, things like that.
And another thing I think that is important about this, you had a really interesting statistic that the majority of the patents that were issued in this country early in the patenting,
When it first
early
started.
on, when it first started, were actually tended to go to visual thinkers.
Well, they
who
were all mechanical devices.
Yes,
The early patents were all mechanical devices, like grain harvesting equipment,
yes,
things like that.
yes. And the world got much more efficient and life got much easier thanks to all these inventions. But now that we've taken shop out of the schools and that we've devalued, working with the
Well,
real
people
world.
don't understand that visual thinking is a different kind of way of solving problems. You
Yes.
see how to make something work. You can see a risk. Like, okay, here's just a real simple example. When I'm giving talks, I make sure the water is far enough away from the laptop so that it won't spill on the laptop and wreck.
Yes.
I make sure the water is far enough away so that will not happen.
And I wouldn't have noticed that could happen.
Well, I saw a guy on a plane. I couldn't believe he did this. We're on a plane and we're flying. He takes this little plastic cup of water and sets it on his open laptop.
Yes. You wouldn't do that.
Be kidding.
I would do that.
No, I would not.
But I would be grateful if you told me, Kim, it's going to spill.
Well, what I would have done is I would have had the laptop closed. Because if I spill it on the lid, it's closed. It'll probably be okay.
Probably
I'd
okay.
Drink the water down.
Yes.
And get rid of it, and then open the laptop and use it.
Yes.
That's what I would do, because water spilling on the keyboard of a laptop wrecks
It's
the
a
laptop.
disaster. Yes. I've been known to spill not only water, but milkshakes on my keyboard of my laptop.
And what happened? Now, keyboard's one thing, but
I mean, on the actual, on the open
on a laptop,
yeah.
they have an external keyboard that's not near.
No, not the external keyboard.
The laptop. Okay, that's really bad. What happened to the laptop?
It died.
That's what I figured. It goes right into the guts of it.
Yes.
You spill it on an external keyboard.
It's
There's
okay.
not many computer parts in there that might survive.
Yes, yes. So, what is your advice if you were working with someone like me who tends to abstract away things to think in terms of words, not images?
Bosses ask me this all the time because I've done a lot of my different kinds of minds talk. I've done it for different companies.
Yes.
No, I've talked to oil rig companies, travel website companies, just all kinds of companies, and I've talked to the head of the company, and I said the first thing is you have to realize different thinking exists.
Yes.
Because I did not know that verbal thinking existed till I was in my late 30s. I simply didn't know.
And I didn't understand visual thinking until I read your book, Temple.
Well, that was the reason for writing the book.
Thank you for writing it.
You really do need all the different kinds of minds. Because you take something like in a food factory, for example, my kind of thinker makes all the mechanical equipment.
Mhm.
And the more mathematical engineers do things like refrigeration, structure of the building so it doesn't fall down, the
Mhm.
things that require a lot more math.
Mhm.
And you need to have both. And then
Yes.
you also need verbal thinkers for organization.
Yes.
Every tech company there ever was
Mhm.
eventually has to hire a grown-up. And that grown-up's usually a verbal thinker. Someone's gotta
Yes.
just run the company.
Yeah. And I think when the verbal thinkers don't appreciate, acknowledge, and honor the other kinds of thinking, things go badly wrong.
Well, I get asked all the time. People ask me, "Well, how do I teach autistic kids, autistic individuals?" Well, I gotta know, am I dealing with a 3-year-old? The first question I gotta know is age. I don't have to have the exact age.
Mhm.
What I have to know is it early intervention we're gonna be talking about? And I can give a pretty general answer for that. Don't wait. Your
Yes.
2-year-old's not talking, your 3-year-old's not talking. You've gotta start working on with them now.
Right.
Is it bullying? Is it noise in the classroom?
And are they being bullied or are
Well,
they
that's what I've gotta
inadvertently
find out.
bullying others? Yeah.
I have to know more about it. I just talked to some parents today where their kid that's partially deaf, is having some really bad problems at school. And then the more I talk to them, I find out they changed a whole bunch of stuff that they hadn't even thought about that could
Yes.
have had an effect. They changed the teacher, they changed the student, they changed the school.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
you didn't tell me that. Okay,
Yeah.
you said you have this behavior problem. But then when I start questioning them, I find out they changed the school, they changed the teacher, they changed a whole bunch of stuff.
And what about, let's imagine that you're giving me advice. I'm hiring a new team and I've hired say 3 employees right out of university who
All right.
are autistic. So they're
All
you
right,
know,
what is what's the purpose of the business? That's the first thing I gotta know. What's
Yeah.
this business for?
Okay, so you're talking to a word person. I'm now making up an imaginary scenario. So
Okay, we'll make
so
it up then, but I've gotta know what it is.
I'll give you but this is really helpful, by the way. This is what good writing is these kinds of questions. So thank you. So I am starting a company that is building an AI bot that will help people become better managers. And let's imagine I've
The
hired.
AI system's gonna help them become better managers.
So what the bot will do is there's going to be it's going to be trained on my books. So there's going to be a
All
small
right,
language.
first of all, what kind of business that they're in? This is gonna matter.
What
What is
kind
the
of
business?
what is
What
my
is
business or the
Well,
business?
this fictional business you're telling me about.
The
What do
fi-
they do?
they're building software. They're software
They're making
engineers.
software. I'll tell you what you don't do.
Okay.
You don't just go to an autistic programmer and say, "Develop new software." That's
Yes.
too vague.
Okay.
You might wanna say, "I want you to develop a translation program that can translate all the slang language from English into French."
Yes.
Okay, you
Yes.
see, that's an example of something specific,
Yes. Okay. So
where
so
there's a
the
specific outcome of the work.
yeah. So the
That's
so
the
the
way I would work with the autistic programmer.
Right. So, and I think that that's really useful feedback for folks because I think that some people might feel like they're micromanaging to give that level of detail, but they're not in this case. They're
You don't
working.
tell them how to do the program.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
the same thing I did with my design work. I'll do the design work, but I
Hmm.
have to know the parameters. What
Yes.
is the cattle handling facility supposed to do? What
Okay.
is the software supposed to do?
Yes.
It has an outcome,
Yes.
and I like a clear outcome. Like when I've done writing projects on animal welfare guidelines, I like to have a piece of the guideline that I write.
Hmm.
It's define what area I cover, get it done at a certain time, do the references in a certain format, and then do it.
Yes. Yes. And I think the other thing that I read in your book that was really helpful is that you knew where your part began and also more importantly perhaps where it ended.
That's
Like
right.
you got the cattle to the slaughterhouse, but once they had been slaughtered, that was no
There's
longer
somebody else's problem, and there's
that's
a
somebody
certain
else.
place in
Yeah.
the line. There's a switch in the line. That's a very
Yeah.
definite
Yeah. Yeah.
boundary. Now, that doesn't mean that if I see mistakes in the other end of the plan, I'm rubbing their nose in it or anything like that. But also, I'm looking at it from a contract standpoint. My responsibility for the equipment ends at that switch.
Yes. Yeah.
You see, that's specific.
Yes. And it can be drawn.
Yeah, and it can be drawn. I can say, okay, I have to do unloading everything in yards, whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it ends at a certain place. I developed this thing called a center track restrainer system, and at the end of that system is basically where my responsibility ends.
Yes. And you also told an incredible story. So thank you, first of all, for that feedback. Like, I think the what I'm learning from you is that if I hire these 3 autistic engineers,
Well, don't tell them how to do programming.
yeah, but I need to be
Tell
very
'em
specific about
exactly what you want the software to do.
yes.
You
Yes.
might have some software on a phone or something eats up too much memory.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't say, I want new software that does exactly the same thing on half the memory.
Yes.
Okay, that's specific. That's an outcome.
That's really good. That's really helpful. The other thing that I really like about that just sort of inspired me about your work is you had a huge impact on the whole industry. Talk to people about how you managed to get into something like a third of all the cattle go through your equipment at this
In
point.
North America.
Yeah, in North America. So how did that happen? How did you make that?
Well, it
That's
started out
unbelievable.
well, one really important scene in the HBO movie Temple Grandin is where I go up to the editor of our state farm magazine and I get his card.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wrote an article about my master's thesis.
Mm-hmm.
And then I volunteered writing a column.
Mm-hmm.
And then I became livestock editor.
Mm-hmm.
But Press Pass got me into so many things.
Yeah.
Another thing it did was credibility.
Yes.
They didn't want to let me into that Arizona cattle feeders meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But I got in and I summarized those talks absolutely accurately. I was a good note taker and I got respect for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I designed stuff, I wrote about it.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a lot of just how-to articles, how to lay out corral systems, how to work the flights on the point of balance in cattle. Lots of practical how-to articles.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of other people who've done some great work. But nobody knows about it. They never wrote about it.
Yes. Yes. So good PR. Good writing.
And not just PR fluff.
Yes.
My idea of an interview, I got to show you this one drawing. This is one. Oh, that's right. This doesn't have video on it.
Well, you can show it to me. I can see
I can show it to you. Okay, I'll show it to you. But my idea of an interview was to just put the drawings down in front of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I sold my work. I showed off the drawings. Now I can't find the drawing in here. Put the book away. But I learned to sell my work by showing off my drawings. Here it is, right here.
Oh wow! Okay, so somebody who sees
that would be a big
knows what
a 2 foot by 3 foot drawing.
Yeah,
and I'd lay it out on the desk.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't lay it out on the desk in front of HR people. I showed the plant engineer and the livestock yard people.
Right.
They're the ones that would care about it.
Yes.
But I learned to sell my work, and they thought I was weird. But when I laid that drawing out in front of them, they go, "You did that?
Yeah,
that's good."
Yes. So I think that's another thing that some of our listeners can learn from you is what you want to do is you want to look at people's work. You don't want to reject them on an interview because you may have a hard time communicating in the interview. But once you see the work, then you realize, I better learn how to work with this person because this person does incredible
work. And I worked with autistic shop people. Like these are people that were very autistic, undiagnosed. They own big metal fabrication shops.
Mm-hmm.
And they were inventing and patenting equipment. Like the mathematical engineers might say, well, those people just build equipment. I'm sorry. No, they make equipment and they invent it.
Yes.
Yes, I just was in a little small plant, brand new one just the other day. Some very nice equipment in there from Poland.
Uh-huh.
And I could tell by the way some of the stuff was put together. It was very nice, but it was a small shop making this stuff. Why aren't we doing it?
Yes.
Because the kids are playing video games in the basement instead of making stuff.
And giving different kids opportunities to do different kinds of work feels like an opportunity to give different kinds of kids different kinds of opportunities to succeed in the world.
Well, there's a lot of stuff talking about, okay, how can we support them in the workplace? Let me give you some very specific things for the workplace.
Okay.
These are things that have come up over and over and over again. First thing, let's avoid the rapid multitasking chaos like a
Yes.
McDonald's takeout window.
Not a good place.
Chaotic Christmas wrapping station.
Right.
These
Not a
things that are
good.
just
Yeah.
chaos.
Yeah.
Okay, another thing is, let's say I have to close out a cash register at Walmart. Let me make a little pilot's checklist of the steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3,
Mhm.
because I have very bad working memory. And bosses
Mhm.
get mad. Well, I already showed them how to work that machine. Are they stupid?
Yeah.
Well, making little checklists.
Right.
Now, I never had an issue with being on time.
Mhm.
That was pounded into me. And there's some autistics that have trouble getting work on time, and for certain jobs, that's not going to go well. And when I worked for the magazine, we had deadlines. I had to get my stuff done,
Yeah.
and I did.
Yeah. And how did you learn how did you learn how to do that? How to be on time, how to get your articles in on time?
Well, my mother had a thing called high expectations with some accommodations.
Uh-huh.
One thing I used to do is print out those calendars where you can see the whole month and write stuff on that.
Uh-huh.
And I always tried to get my stuff done early.
Yes.
I didn't wait until the day before to write the article.
Yes.
What I tried to do, I covered the cattle feeders meeting, is I would come home and I'd write the article either the next day while it's still really fresh in my mind.
Those are good tips. And I really love what your mother said. High expectations with accommodations.
I'll give some examples of accommodation.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, we could do, by the time I was 5, even though I was very nonverbal, very severe behaviors at age 3, by the time I was 5 or 6 years old, we could do family gatherings.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we would do is I needed a place to exercise. So
Mhm.
when we went to my grandmother's apartment that was 5 floors up, I'd run up the fire stairs and beat the elevator. Always
Uh-huh.
beat the elevator. And that burst of exercise helped me to be calmer.
Yes.
Okay, that was an accommodation. And when we had to go on a ferry boat and it had this super loud horn,
Mhm.
I hated that horn. She didn't force me to sit under the horn.
Yes.
I was allowed to ride in the cabin below,
Yes.
but I was going to go on the ferry. The family had to go on the ferry. It was one of those ferries you drive cars onto. And the accommodation was to sit below. Now they'd have noise canceling headphones. So those didn't exist in the
Yeah.
50s.
Yeah.
But these were accommodations. You'd make some accommodation, but we're going to do the family dinner at Granny's and we're going to go on the ferry.
I love that.
That's what she did. And now as I talk about it, I'm seeing the ferry. I remember when I was 5, the horn went off. I flung myself on the deck because when it was nice weather, people wanted to ride on the deck on the ship.
Yes.
They didn't want to ride in the cabin. It was raining. Everybody was in the cabin, but usually it wasn't raining. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'd go right straight to the cabin.
Insulated from the noise.
Yeah, it was far enough away. It didn't bother me.
I have one last question for you. There was another story that you told that was very moving about as you were publishing these articles. You also persuaded a leader from a large, I think, fast food restaurant to go to a slaughterhouse where things were not going well.
Well, I was hired by McDonald's.
Mm-hmm.
I designed a lot of equipment. This was 80s, early 90s. I had a lot of equipment out, especially in the beef industry.
Yeah.
A lot of equipment out there. And it was very frustrating. I mean, half my clients tore stuff up and wrecked it.
Yeah.
That was very frustrating.
I bet.
And then McDonald's Corporation was forced to look at the animal welfare issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hired, this is about 1997, to take heads of McDonald's, Wendy's, and Burger King out on their first trips to slaughter plants. And when things were going good, that was fine. When things were going bad, they were horrified. Yeah, we need to be fixing some stuff.
Yeah.
It was just like that show Undercover Boss.
Uh-huh.
And I came up with a very simple way to evaluate the slaughter plants. There were 5 things you measured. Things like falling during handling, electric pride use, cattle bell run, things like that.
Mhm.
You could measure these things. And I taught their food safety auditors that were already out in the industry on how to do these welfare audits. And the good news is that most of the places, even the older places, didn't have to buy all new equipment. They had to
Mhm.
repair a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And they had to put in non-slip flooring, and they had to supervise employees and do better cattle behavior, moving smaller groups of animals, for example.
Yes.
And out of 74 plants on the McDonald's approved supplier list, only 3 had to buy expensive things. Now, I sold expensive things, but one of the things I did is what I call reverse conflict of interest. I did everything possible to make whatever they had there work. That's one of the reasons why the industry didn't go into revolt against me, because I was not forcing equipment down their throat. That I was not doing.
Yes.
And there were 3 plants with hopelessly overloaded equipment, and that had to be replaced.
Yeah.
I let that slide for a while. But
Yeah.
that's something I'm very proud of. It was very, very simple. It's sort of like traffic. Really, when you get right down to it, what do the police enforce? The 2 most important things: drunk driving and speeding.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, they might pull you off for not signaling when you change lanes, but not many people get pulled over for that. The most important things are drunk driving and speeding.
Yes.
And then stopping violations and seatbelts.
And so you said, here are the 5 things that you have to measure in order to approve your suppliers.
That's right. And then there were acts of abuse that automatic failures.
So you boiled it down to 5 simple metrics that they could track, so they could make
were 5
these
simple things.
Yeah.
And there were electric prod use, falling during handling, vocalization when you're handling them, cattle fellering, stunning. You better make them unconscious 95% of the time on the first shot. Now the plants are at 99 point something plus.
Yes.
And when you hang it up, it better be unconscious.
Yes. And those
are very, very simple things.
And when you told me the story, I remember 2 things. I remember the 5 simple metrics, but the thing that I really, so now you see how my mind works. The thing that is burned into my mind about the story you told me is that there were a couple of, I forgot which of the fast food chains, but there were a couple of people on one tour, and the cow had been hung up, but it was still conscious, and it was terrible. What was happening?
No, that's totally terrible. You don't do that.
Yeah. And when he needed actually to see it.
Well, that's the thing. It's like that show Undercover Boss.
Okay.
Everything is an abstraction until they actually see it.
Yes.
I'll never forget the day when a skinny, emaciated, half-dead dairy cow went up the ramp into their product. Boy.
Yeah.
That's all they talked about on the way back to the airport. I can assure you of that.
Yes. But it's also so important because you were able to, you knew that those images were already in your mind, and you found a way to get them into the minds of these people.
Well, I also explain it's like traffic. When you really think about it, the police, so you have 5 things for it.
Yes.
Drunk driving, speeding, red light and stop sign violations, seatbelts, and now texting.
Yeah.
And they measure the drunk driving. They measure the speeding. They have devices to measure that. They don't just say they think you're speeding. See, we would count 100 head cattle sample. How many animals fell? How many animals got poked with the electric rod? You count that. It was very, very objective. So when I first started doing it, I'd have a McDonald's representative beside me. I'd have the plant manager beside me, and we'd all get the same score.
Yeah. So you had an objective measure.
Yeah, we had an objective measure.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why it worked.
Yeah. So a highly emotionally charged image of something going wrong, and an objective measure about how to prevent that from happening.
It's similar to traffic. I mean, car accidents are horrible.
Yeah, brutal. Yes.
Yeah, horrible.
Yeah.
But it's the trick is, what are the 5 important things to measure? Now, a lot of times I'll do an exercise with traffic, and I'll have people say, forget to do the turn signal or something like that. Yeah, that's important. But sometimes I find when I do that exercise, that people are slow to put what I call the 800-pound gorilla, which would be drunk driving. That's big number 1.
Yes. Yes, it is. And hopefully we'll see more enforcement.
But the thing that what worries me with too many verbal thinkers, in charge, is you have to figure out which details are important.
Yes.
Like, let's look at something like the iPhone. Steve Jobs was an artist, and he made an interface that was easy to use. He wasn't a programmer; he was an artist.
Yeah, Steve Jobs used to say that Apple was at the intersection of the liberal arts and technology, and the arts were an important part of that.
He took a calligraphy class.
Yes,
that made a very big impression on him.
Absolutely.
That's why and that's a humanities course.
Yes.
It made a very big impression on Steve Jobs.
Yes.
I remember one time he said about the iPhone, I wanted to make a device that people didn't know they wanted it until they saw it.
Yes.
Now, most of the improvements on the phone are just incremental.
Yes. Yeah. And I think what part of what you're saying here is that the value of the collaboration between a verbal thinker and a visual thinker.
Well, let's go back to my book, Visual Thinking, which
Mhm.
was Betsy's and I's big COVID project.
Mhm.
I wrote the rough drafts, kind of disorganized because my thinking's associational. Like I was
Yeah.
talking about the pigeon welding thing.
Yeah.
Then I'm now seeing a pigeon flying through the Newark airport.
Right.
Now I'm in the pigeon file.
Right.
That is associational thinking. And then Betsy would go through it with a highly verbal mind and she smoothed it out for me. So we were using our skills in a collaboration. We were using the benefits of both kinds of skills. That's really important.
It is really important. And it yields a much better product. So amazing. So amazing. Well, Temple, every time I speak with you, I learn so much. And I know our listeners have learned a lot too. And so I'm going to say one of my resolutions for 2025 is to partner with more visual thinkers, because I know that would really deepen my thinking about anything I'm working on. Well, Temple, I want to thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing your wisdom with our listeners. This was a great conversation, and I think we will help all kinds of different people learn how to work together better.
The Radical Candor podcast is based on the book Radical Candor, Be a Kick-Ass Boss Without Losing Your Humanity by Kim Scott. Episodes are written and produced by Brandy Neal with script editing by me, Amy Sandler. The show features Radical Candor co-founders Kim Scott and Jason Rosoff and is hosted by me, still Amy Sandler. Nick Carissimi is our audio engineer. The Radical Candor podcast theme music was composed by Cliff Goldmacher. Follow us on LinkedIn, Radical Candor the Company, and visit us at radicalcandor.com.